Hello everyone out there in YouTube land. You can refer to me as D. I'm the owner, founder, and CEO of Big_D_Studios. Well, actually it's simply called Big D Studios, but incredibly, somebody already had that name for a YouTube channel, believe it or not. Now I realize that I'm putting myself in great danger by appearing on camera like this without my mask, like I did in my very first video. But what I'm about to do might look silly with me wearing a mask. Besides, I already appeared maskless when I uploaded a video of me singing karaoke on that cruise ship a few months ago. Now, this is the first in a series of videos that I plan on making in which I read a story out loud. The story comes from a book. For those Gen Zers out there that are watching, I will explain to you what a book is. A book is a small object that has slips of paper inside and words in. I know, weird, huh? The particular story I'm going to read to you is this one, Unbirthday. The sequel to the classic story Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. A funny story about this. I got this book as a Christmas present a few years ago, and I haven't even finished it. I started reading through it twice, and yet I haven't even finished it. As you can see, there's a bookmark here. And that's kind of the reason why I'm doing this. This is the first in a series of videos. So, Unbirthday, a twisted tale. What if Wonderland was in peril and Alice is very, very late? Alice is different from other 18-year-old ladies in Victorian Kexford, which is perfectly fine with her. She'd rather spend her golden afternoons taking pictures with a trusty camera, chatting with outrageous Aunt Vivian, or visiting the children in the square that receiving visitors or doing embroidery, thank you very much. She's also interested in learning more about the young lawyer she just met, but only because he's rather curious, not because he's rosy-cheeked and charming. But when Alice develops the latest photographs of her neighbors, strangely familiar faces appear instead. The Queen of Hearts, the Mad Hatter, even the Caterpillar. There's something quite off about them, even for Wonderland creatures. And in her self-portrait, Alice finds the most disturbing image of all, an imprisoned and injured dark-haired girl begging for Alice's help. Returning to the place of nonsense from her childhood, Alice finds herself on a mission to stop the Queen of Hearts' mad military march across Wonderland, and to find a place in both worlds. But will she be able to do so before the end of time? Well, let's find out together. Here goes. I know you can't see the book, but Chapter 1. Morning sunlight waved a cheery hello on the papered walls of an equally cheery bedroom. It had rained overnight, a proper rain, hard with big droplets, and the day came fresh, scrubbed, and eager. The air that drifted through the open window was chill and sharp and had a bit of a kick to it. A flock of little sparrows who had been nestmates barely a week earlier chirped excitedly back and forth in a way that would eventually result in either sudden flight en masse or feathery fisticuffs. Even the hammer strikes of Mrs. Anderby's solid heels against the floor downstairs sounded springier and more energetic than usual. The girl lying so peacefully in a brass-framed bed, thick golden hair spread around her head and neck like the reflected halo of an angel, was coaxed from sleep to wake at once by the abundance of all these cheerful noises. Her eyes snapped open, the long lashes of her lids waving like wheat with the suddenness of the motion. "Today," Alice declared, "is a perfect day for adventure." She grinned and basked in the glory of her decision for a moment, then shot out of bed. Dinah, a cat both grumpy and unwilling to see the day for what it was, stretched once in place, where formerly her mistress's warm feet had been, then closed one elderly eye to the day and was asleep again seconds later. "Sorry, old girl," Alice said, giving her a kiss, "but tempers fugit, you know. Time waits for no one." Of course, this being the time and place that it was, adventurers couldn't just run out the door in their chemise. It would be scandalous. And so Alice began the tedious process of donning all the layers necessary to going out into the world as a respectable young English lady. She had drawers that went down to her knees, a crinoline that looked like a cross between a bee, skep, and a cage. It was basically a series of steel hoops in diminishing circumference that circled her lower body from her calves to her waist. This held the skirts worn on top of it from around her like a giant bell with her legs the clapper. Corset. She didn't tight-lace, despite the fashion and the pressure from friends. On this one thing Alice and her sister agreed. It was pure foolishness. Her waist was fine as it was, thank you very much, and she left the corset set to his main jobs, keeping her back aligned and her womanly attributes smooth and in place. Petticoat. Actual dress. A nice summer weight gingham in blue and white. Jacket and hat. And finally, camera bag. Alice hurried through all this as fast as she could, and then nearly skipped like a girl much younger than 18 as she ran down the stairs, only remembering to try to keep her focus silent at the very last, and far too late minute. "Alice," a strident female voice cried out. Mathilda, her sister, of course. Well, since she had been heard, she might as well have some breakfast. Good morning, Mother. Father, sister," she said grandly, skipping into the dining room. Her family was gathered at one end of the long table like defiant squirrels, cracking soft-boiled eggs, spreading jam on toast, sipping tea and coffee, and generally looking completely at ease with the formal and bric-a-brac-filled room. Her mother turned a plump, still pink cheek for a kiss, and Alice obliged. Her father's face was mostly hidden behind the newspaper, but she managed to get in a quick peck, not quite on his mutton chop. She patted her sister on the shoulder dismissively, as if brushing off some dandruff. "Married yet?" her father asked from behind the paper. "No, Papa." "In the stocks yet?" "No, Papa." Good." He shook his paper to facilitate the turning and folding of a page, and then continued reading about things happening in foreign places, his favorite type of story. "Are you sure it's good, Papa?" Mathilda asked. She was severe, beautiful in a slightly off-putting way, dark eyes and lashes and hair where her younger sisters were light. Her somber dress was as drab as Alice's blue and white one was gray and summery. But if they ever had really made an effort to go out together, and if Mathilda ever made an effort with her appearance beyond brushing her hair, they could have owned all of the town of Kexford. Not that Alice wanted to own Kexford, but it would have been an absolute gas for one party at least. "She's 18, you know," Mathilda prodded, spreading jam on her toast most seriously. "And I believe you're 26, her mother observed. "I have prospects." "Yes, you do," her mother said quickly and soothingly. "I'll keep my baby girl Alice for as long as I possibly can," her father said from behind the paper. "Don't go interfering with that." My dear friend Mr. Hestruth has a friend, Richard Coney, Mathilda said, turning to Alice and ignoring her parents. I believe I've told you about him a number of times. I think you may have even met him once. Very bright young man, handsome, with a great future before him. He is already working on Gilbert Ramsbottom's election campaign. I have invited him. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, he sounds lovely. Yes, thoroughly interesting. Fantastic. Do keep me informed of his doings. Absolutely. Good morning and goodbye. Alice winked at her mother, who tried very hard not to smile. Then she grinned and spun away, and it wasn't until Mathilda turned back to her breakfast with a huff that she noticed her carefully buttered and jammed toast was missing. Walking down the sunny road, Alice thoroughly enjoyed her purloined breakfast, so expertly buttered and jammed. After wiping her lips and cheeks with the back of her hand, like a cat, she raised her face to the sun, enjoying its warmth as it hit her skin. For only a moment, of course, before it did any real damage. She adjusted her hat and, "Oh, dear!" She had forgotten her gloves. "Oh, my fur and whiskers!" she sighed. "Not respectable at all today." A momentary feeling overcame her. It wasn't sadness exactly, but it wasn't just nostalgia either. There was a golden drop of happiness in the feeling, whatever it was, as warming and delightful as sunlight. A memory of old dreams that were worn thin like the comfiest pillowcase one couldn't bear to throw out. Wonderland. The details had dimmed long ago, but the feelings remained. Adventure, magic, fascinating creatures. True, not all her imagined adventures in Wonderland had been fun or safe, and not all the people had been particularly nice or polite. Some of the flowers in Wonderland were downright violent. And the Queen of Hearts, she wanted Alice dead. "Off with her head!" The phrase still sent shivers down Alice's spine. But she had had another dream like that once since. "Stuff and nonsense," Alice declared, shaking her head. "It's a gorgeous day. Let's go find the magic right here." Right here was, of course, Kexford, a shining little town of university professors, ancient halls, glorious green parks, and glittering canals. There were gleaming white walkways, ancient stone buildings, and gardens so tiny and bright they practically sparkled like jewels. Everything was ordered and perfect and old in these hallowed grounds, even down to the properly erect, robed students hurrying to class after late-night partying or the disgusting Petrarch. Alice's home was just north of the university area, a fine large place with gardens and a lawn. Not too long a walk to where the action was downtown, but not close enough to hear "Godam Zigitter" being belted out at 3 o'clock in the morning. After waking from that magical dream ages ago, little Alice had devoted all her free time to searching the town for anything that reminded her of Wonderland. No place was safe from explorations. Every bell tower she could sneak into, every alley she could slip down where her parents' backs were turned, top to bottom, high and low, nary a stone unturned. Mostly low. Rabbit holes and mushrooms, tiny caterpillars and large spider webs, dumbwaiters and surprisingly small doors in other people's houses. She really ought not to have explored and opened. Her wooden treasure box had contained rather more than the usual number of strange trinkets children tend to collect. Tiny brass keys, tiny glass bottles, leftover halves of unusual biscuits, a left white glove, a right off-white glove, scraps of paper with the words "Eat me" and "Drink me" laboriously written over and over again as she tried to match her flourishes to memory. Alice hadn't been a morose girl, far from it, but she wondered sometimes if the reason she never again dreamed of Wonderland was just a little bit her fault. Of all the silly nonsense, this is the stupidest tea party I've ever been to in my life. Well, I've had enough nonsense. I'm going home. Straight home. Oh, no, please, no more nonsense. No more nonsense. There, she said herself, and her subconscious had blinded and kept her nightly excursions to a world with little nonsense in it at all. So, Alice had tried her hand in drawing the few things she remembered clearly from her dream. The Cheshire Cat, the White Rabbit, a pretty little golden key, or the curious things she saw while she was out exploring. A student with surprisingly pointed ears, an interesting clump of moss, part of a stone wall with vines that looked like they could be pushed aside to reveal a hidden entrance to somewhere fantastic. Her father said, looking over her sketches. We don't have much artistry ability in my side of the family either, her mother commented. She does notice many obscure things, even if she can't reproduce them. Yes, she spends quite a bit of spare time noticing things. Perhaps she needs some sort of focus for that, besides drawing, I mean. And that was where Aunt Vivian had come in. She couldn't draw either, but she could sculpt a fair piece, hosted literary salons, was occasionally involved in rather scandalous doings, and wore trousers like coal-hauling pit lass. Her house was running over with fringed lamps, art made by her friends, incense burners, and velvet. She was not married. In fact, she was just about everything a family could hope for in a black sheep. And she helped her brother and his wife and their daughter by fulfilling their role perfectly. She bought her a nice camera. One of the latest models, a Phobos box camera. It was a beautiful little thing and extremely portable, requiring neither a tripod nor bellows. It fit nicely to a medium-sized case and could be brought out to quickly capture whatever took Alice's fancy, provided the light was bright enough. Aunt Vivian already had a darkroom sufficient for developing his glass plates. She was famous for the costumed tableaux she took at her salons with a much more traditional and giant-sized portrait camera. Alice was delighted. There was something inherently Wonderlandy about the whole process. Light and shadow and mirrors and glasses and lenses and images appearing magically. A side effect of the new hobby was spending a lot more time with her aunt, which relieved her parents, who were concerned about her wandering the streets of Kexford by herself, and worried her sister, who believed Aunt Vivian was a terrible influence. Not so much modern as profligate. Mathilda need not have been over concerned, however. Alice loved her aunt, but she was now 18 and had her own agenda, which had nothing to do with artists or vermouth or poppies or trousers. Alice, of course, used the camera to document anything that remoted a bit mysterious. She spent her days on what she called photo walks, looking for objects and people that hinted at a hidden fae or wild side, which she would try to coax out with her camera. Once she found a potential subject, she worked long and hard composing the shot, sometimes with additional mirrors or a lantern if it was in a dimly lit alley. She had developed these images in her aunt's darkroom and then laid them out around her own room, studying them and trying to conjure a world out of what she saw there. Sparkling dew on spiderwebs, gloomy attics, a pile of bright refuse that might have hidden a monster or a poem. The elfin qualities of a child, her eyes innocent and old at the same time. She never told her parents or her sister about her visits to the less storybook parts of Kexford. Bears where things weren't quite kept as neat or perfect order that she found magic and nonsense had a chance to bloom. And that was where she was headed on this glorious day, down the road and south, and then east, away from the pretty campuses and annoying students. She chose route to pass Mrs. Yao's tea shop. Really, it was too beautiful a day for a cup of oolong and gossip, and she was still full from a stolen bread and jam for a sweet bun. But she turned down the tiny twisty street anyway and contented herself with a smile and a wave to the woman behind the window. Mrs. Yao smiled and waved back. She served her customers out of brightly mismatched cups and plates from England, China, and even Russia, which was magical and felt a bit like Wonderland. Just past the tea shop, under a rain spout, was a tiny, delicate fern that had not been there the week before. Alice's questioning eyes immediately spotted its out-of-place bright greenness, its patterned and gracefully uncurling frond. Definitely magical. She gazed alight and then pursued her lips sadly. Pursed her lips sadly. Sorry. The narrow street was dismally dark. She had no lantern or mirror, and only a few more film plates left, none to waste on potentially terrible shots. "Apologies, young Master Fern," she said, giving it a little curtsy, Maybe next time, when you've grown a bit. Or open up like a telescope, really. Following the twisty street around, farther into a tangle of old buildings, she stooped through a low archway and finally emerged at a real destination. At one time, the little open area had been officially called Wellington Square, but it was now simply as the Square. As in the square where many local children met up and played, often the sons and daughters, or orphans, of immigrants, who weren't necessarily welcome in the nicer parks. Alice took their portraits and listened to stories of their homelands and travels to England, some of which, especially with the younger sitters, would mix up with fairy tales from their mother countries. Today, several of the children had had a ball and were playing with it in a corner, scuffing up the dirt. And in another corner, 3 girls were playing a counting game, effortlessly switching back and forth between English and Russian and Yiddish. Alice took out a camera and began composing possible images in her head. "Oh, look! It's that famous English girl come to take photographs of the poor but pretty foreign children." Alice spun around, affronted by both the words and tone. A young man not much older than herself leaned lazily on a worn statue of a cannon and gave her an indecipherable smile. His clothes were very different from the rest of the crowd here. They were adult for one thing, pressed and clean and gray and professional. His jacket was spotless, his waistcoat well-fitting. He didn't have a watch, but his purple cravat looked expensive and silken. His hair was carefully brushed. Under it was red hair so dark it was nearly black, trimmed very neatly round the ears and neck. His eyes were light hazel that was nearly orange. His cheeks glowed a healthy shade of rose. "Tell me," he continued, reaching down to pet a stray cat that quickly disappeared around the corner, do you patrons enjoy weeping crocodile tears over portraits of the other half and how they live?" "I beg your pardon," Alice replied coldly, straightening her spine until it cracked. "These photographs are for my personal use, in the case of private viewing with my aunt to a select and discreet crowd. I'm not some sort of terrible charity vampire preying on the sorrowful state of others." "Oh, and how much do you know about their sorrowful state? How much do you know about them at all?" he pressed. Alice regarded him coolly for a minute. "That girl over there, in the jacket with the large bone button, her name is Adina. She is from a shuttle too far from St. Petersburg to be safe from the pogroms. Her mother is dead. Her father and her Aunt Sylvia are the only family in the world." She gestured at another child. "That's Sasha. He's probably 5 years old and prefers cheese to sweets. His mother sews piecework and his father collects rags for the paper companies, and his sister's dying of tuberculosis, although he really doesn't understand that yet. I never speak to them patronizingly, and I never bribe them to pose with coins or candy. If I bring anything, it is enough for all them, and it's just because it pleases me to give. I treat even the littlest one with the same kindness and respect as I expect out of everyone." She said the last bit pointedly, glaring at the stranger. All right, all right." The young man laughed easily. "I apologize. I accused you without knowing whereof I spoke. I was a cad and a scoundrel." He gave a bow, and it wasn't ironic at all. "You are forgiven," Alice said, polite but still distant. "May I know whom I have the pleasure of addressing?" "Katz," he said, taking his hat off. "Abraham Joseph Katz, Esquire, barrister at Alexandros and Ivy. But you can call me Katz. At your service." She began to introduce herself. "Oh, everyone knows Alice and her camera around here," the man said, waving his hand. "The one, the only Alice. But seriously, you have to understand, these children, even those of us who have grown up here, have not had the greatest experience with your fellow countrymen. Either it's spit and sneers or cold charity and exploitation. There's rarely a middle ground. Us? You look, Alice faltered, wondering if she was being rude, British. I was born here. My parents were not, he said with a shrug. They worked hard, and I studied hard. Now I help out when I can with a little pro bono work. Sometimes someone with legal power needs to step in and save a child from the poorhouse or a parent from jail, or worse. Sometimes their patrons, say with a camera, takes a child they fancy away entirely. for display, or simply for charity, or for things not best spoken of. That's dreadful, Alice said with feeling. I am deeply, deeply sorry for all of it. All the same, you can't blame me for the actions of a few of my terrible countrymen. That would be just like me treating you all poorly because of one bad apple that came in from Russia. A perfectly fair point, he agreed immediately. In that case, I'll offer my stunning visits in case you ever decide you want to come back and take a portrait of me. I am an adult and a child of immigrants, and I can legally agree to fair uses of my likeness, should it come to that. There was nothing untoward in his tone. He did not wink at her or enunciate any words suggestively. He smiled, and it was innocent. He didn't even tilt his head dramatically as if posing. Alice felt neither flirted with nor threatened. It was a little strange. Your English is better than that of many of my countrymen, she said slowly while she tried to work out what that meant. My neighbors, at least. What on earth was she talking about? Was that rude? He had grown up here. He just said that. Of course he could speak English. Of course he could speak English perfectly well. Ah, well, barrister, remember? I know Latin as well as Russian and English. Quo use tandem and all that. I should probably learn French, however, so I can at least pronounce the wines. Alice felt the world spin a bit like she was tumbling down a rabbit hole. What a strange man to meet in such a strange way. Normally, she'd either avoided the young man pushed on by her sister, or quickly forgot the one she somehow met herself. Most were dull and unlikely to be found in this forgotten square. They all made unamusing and lewd jokes and references to Roman scholars they thought she wouldn't get. She never had a desire to take a picture of any of them. Unlike Mr. Katz. I didn't bring in a film today, she lied. But she did have lots of film already exposed and now Vivian's waiting to process. Really, that's what she should have been doing instead of spending the day adventuring. I was just realizing that when you approached me. Oh, I was joking about the picture. It's just that I have nothing besides my handsome good looks to offer you. To make up for my insults. I should keep a packet of sweets on me at all times. Remember that. Always keep a candy around for emergencies. Someday it may save your life. Or if you have any rats around your house, I could get them for you. I have a friend who is an expert at it. That won't be necessary, Alice said quickly. I'm fairly certain our gardens are rat-free. I don't know. Rats are pretty sneaky. Sometimes they even make it into elected positions. Sometimes if you let them get out of control, they even become mayor. Alice couldn't repress a smile at that, and it almost became a snicker. He was very obviously referring to Ramsbottom, the candidate her sister and the boring Mr. Hedgestruth so fervently supported. There was only one other person running, and for the life of her, Alice couldn't remember his name. He was quite forgettable, since he had no party affiliation, and didn't write letters to the Kexford Weekly about building workhouses for the poor, kicking out foreigners, and giving out the police bigger clubs. Well, that should be off then, Alice said, putting the camera firmly back in her satchel and closing it up. Come back soon, Kaz pleaded. You're the most interesting person I've talked to in ages. Not if you're in a bright light-in-the-dark corner of the world, not a fair face in a gloomy neighborhood, not a muse or a nymph or an angel with a rosy smile to bestow on her willing supplicants. None of that matters. None of that nonsense verbiage men usually offered her. He asked her to return, very simply, because he wanted to talk to her. Alice curtsied, because it was always good to curtsy while you were thinking of a reply, then hurried off, unable to think of one. And that's the end of Chapter 1. A good place to leave off. Well, that's it for this part of the video. I will read Chapter 2 sometime. Until next time, please like and subscribe, and stay big, everyone.